before the world knew the name Koenigsegg, before the record-breaking hypercars, before the world took a 22-year-old seriously. There was just one young man standing in front of a dream that everyone else thought was impossible. His name was Christian von Koenigsegg. He didn't come from a giant automaker. He didn't come from a racing dynasty. He wasn't an engineer from Ferrari. He wasn't a designer from Lamborghini. He didn't have billions of dollars. He didn't even have a real factory. What he had was a vision so outrageous that people laughed at him, a vision so ambitious that experts told him it could never happen. But Christian didn't care. In 1994, at just 22 years old, he decided he wanted to build the world's greatest supercar. Not just a fast car, not just a good attempt, but a machine that could beat every giant in the industry. Ferrari, he would beat them. Lamborghini, he would surpass them. Bugatti, he would chase them down. McLaren, he would challenge their engineering. The world said, "Impossible, you're just one man." Christian said, "Watch me." A childhood of obsessions. Christian wasn't like other kids. While other children played with toys, he studied how machines worked. He wasn't just fascinated by cars. He was obsessed. His childhood hero was Flakklipper Grand Prix, a Norwegian stop-motion film about a crazy inventor building the greatest race car ever. Most kids would watch it and forget. Christian watched it and believed it. He didn't see it as fiction. He saw it as a blueprint. Since childhood, he didn't just want to drive supercars. He wanted to build them. Not assemble, not copy, not modify. Build from scratch. No experience, no factory, no team, no funding. By the early 90s, supercar companies were massive. Ferrari had decades of heritage. Lamborghini had global reputation. McLaren had F1 experience. Bugatti was backed by billionaires. Porsche had engineering empires. And Christian, he had nothing. No investors. No engineers. No wind tunnels. No equipment. No headquarters. Not even a small workshop. All he had was belief. And a sketch taped to his bedroom wall. The sketch was his first supercar idea. He looked at it every day. Not as a dream, but as a future. Starting from zero, Christian began working out of a tiny workshop in southern Sweden. This wasn't a factory. This wasn't even a proper garage. It was a small shed with basic lighting and cheap tools that barely worked. But from that tiny space, he began building the foundation of what would become one of the greatest hypercar companies in history. He worked day and night. No weekends. No holidays. No excuses. He wasn't rich. He wasn't connected. So he became a one-man army. Heavy checkmark designer. Heavy checkmark engineer. Heavy checkmark fabricator. Heavy checkmark mechanic. Heavy checkmark businessman. Heavy checkmark marketer. Heavy checkmark dreamer. When he didn't know something, he learned it. When he couldn't afford something, he built it himself. When a tool didn't exist, he invented it. That was the Koenigsegg way. Before the world even knew the name. The world laughs, but Sweden listens. Whenever Christian shared his idea, people laughed. You want to beat Ferrari at 22? Where's your factory? Where's your funding? This is impossible. But something amazing happened. A few people, a small handful, saw something in him. They saw passion. They saw intelligence. They saw madness in a good way. Swedish suppliers, engineers, and businessmen started offering small pieces of support. A discount on materials. Some free tools, a small workspace, a used CNC machine, advice from older engineers. Piece by piece, Christian built not just a car, but a team, a tiny team, a family, a group of people who believed in the impossible. He named his company Koenigsegg Automotive AB. Most companies start with money. Koenigsegg started with faith. The first challenge, build a car nobody can ignore. Christian knew something important. No one would take him seriously. Until he built a prototype. That shocked the world. Not a good first attempt. Not a small brand supercar. Not for a new company, it's okay. He needed something that would make Ferrari nervous. Something that would make journalists stare. Something that would make people say, "Who built this?" And so Christian began building his first prototype. The Koenigsegg CC. This was the beginning of the legend. A young man, a tiny team. A dream that made no sense. And a car that would soon become a global shockwave. The world didn't know it yet, but the fight against Bugatti, Ferrari, McLaren, and Lamborghini was about to begin. Christian von Koenigsegg knew something brutally simple. No one respects an idea, only results. If he wanted the world to take him seriously, if he wanted Ferrari, Lamborghini, McLaren, Bugatti, and Porsche to even look in his direction, he needed one thing: a car that made everyone shut up. Not a sketch, not a dream, not a garage project. A real prototype. A supercar that looked like it belonged on the cover of every magazine. A machine that screamed, "Koenigsegg is here." But building such a car, inside a tiny Swedish shed, with barely any money, with zero experience, it was madness. And yet, that's exactly what he did. The birth of the CC, a vision on 4 wheels. In 1994, Christian began building what would become the Koenigsegg CC. The first real prototype. The CC stood for Competition Coupe. But internally, it meant something deeper. Courage and commitment. From day one, Christian refused to think small. He wasn't building a starter car. He was building a supercar to challenge million-dollar giants. So he sketched a design that was wild. Heavy check mark low. Heavy check mark sleek. Heavy check mark futuristic. Heavy check mark shark-like. Heavy check mark elegant but deadly. Every curve had purpose. Every panel had attitude. It looked like something out of the future. But drawing a masterpiece was easy. Building one, that was war. Materials he couldn't afford, so he built them. Christian wanted to use carbon fiber, but it was insanely expensive in the 90s. Ferrari only used it on special models. McLaren used it for the F1 because they had Formula One funding. Other brands avoided it. Christian had no money, so he did something insane. He learned to build carbon fiber parts by hand. He bought small rolls, made homemade molds, studied aerospace techniques, and learned through failure. He built, broke, rebuilt, and broke again. Every failure taught him something. Every broken panel brought him closer to perfection. And slowly, the body of the first Koenigsegg began to take shape. An engine with no rules. Christian didn't have money to design his own engine. Designing a new engine from scratch takes decades, millions, and the resources of a giant automaker. Christian had none of that. So he did the smart thing. He took an existing engine and rebuilt it into something unrecognizable. He modified internals, changed fuel systems, improved cooling, added custom components, and tuned it far beyond original limits. This wasn't using an existing engine. This was Koenigsegg-ifying it, turning a normal engine into a monster, turning limitations into innovation. A tiny team with giant dreams. By now, Christian had gathered a small team. Not big names, not world-class engineers, just passionate people who believed in the impossible. They worked out of a cold workshop, with poor equipment, and no automation. Every part was handmade. Heavy check mark the panels. Heavy check mark the chassis. Heavy check mark the brackets. Heavy check mark the bolts. Heavy check mark even some tools. When they needed a machine they couldn't afford, they built one. Every night the tiny workshop glowed with light. As the team worked past midnight, outsiders thought they were crazy. But they weren't crazy. They were creating history. The first time the CC moved, after months of struggle, the first prototype stood on its wheels. Not finished, not perfect, but alive. The team rolled it out of the workshop, everyone holding their breaths. Christian sat inside, turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. A roar that didn't just echo through the shed. It echoed through Christian's entire life. That day he didn't just start an engine. He started Koenigsegg. The car moved slowly at first, barely a few meters. But in that moment, Christian proved something monumental. A young man in a shed can build a world-class supercar. The world still didn't believe, so he aimed bigger asterisk. Even though the CC prototype existed, the world wasn't convinced. Journalists thought it was a cute attempt. Experts said it looked too ambitious for a newcomer. People asked, where will you race, or where will you sell it? Christian didn't argue. He just planned the next step. Build a better prototype, one that could stand on a world stage. So he redesigned the CC. Sharper, stronger, lighter, faster. This second version would become the Koenigsegg CC8S, the car that would put Koenigsegg on the global map. But between the first CC and the world stage lay a challenge that nearly killed the company before it even began. Because the next chapter wasn't about engineering. It was about survival. Christian von Koenigsegg had proven he could build a prototype. But in the world of supercars, a single prototype means nothing. If he wanted Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche, Bugatti and McLaren to notice him, he needed something more, something undeniable. A car so refined, so real, so advanced, that the world would stop laughing. And that next step became the machine that changed everything. The Koenigsegg CC8S. A second prototype and a second gamble. Most young car companies never make it beyond their first model. They burn out, run out of money, lose momentum, or collapse under pressure. Christian wasn't backed by billionaires or governments. He was supported by Heavy check mark, a small workshop. Heavy check mark, a tiny Swedish team. Heavy check mark, borrowed equipment. Heavy check mark, modest grants. Heavy check mark, and blind faith in his vision. Building another car wasn't an upgrade. It was a risk capable of ending everything. But Christian knew something simple and brutal. To be taken seriously, the next car had to look like it belonged on the world stage. Not a homemade project. Not a newbie supercar. A legitimate threat. Designing a Koenigsegg original. The second prototype, later known as the CC8S, needed its own identity. Not borrowed. Not copied. Not inspired by Ferrari or Lamborghini. So Christian and his small team designed something unique. Heavy check mark, the dihedral synchrohelix doors. Doors that didn't open up, out or forward. They twisted upward in a perfect fluid motion. No company on Earth had anything like it. It was strange, beautiful, hypnotic. Today it's Koenigsegg's signature. Heavy check mark, carbon fiber everything. In the 90s, carbon fiber was extremely expensive. Christian didn't care. He had already learned to make it by hand. He doubled down on lightness and strength. turning financial disadvantage into engineering dominance. Heavy check mark future-shaped aerodynamics. The car was sculpted for air. Every curve had purpose. Downforce, stability, cooling. The CC8S didn't just look fast. It was fast. Heavy check mark, a removable roof. Before supercar targas were mainstream, Christian designed a carbon roof that tucked perfectly into the front trunk. Not flashy, just functional genius. The CC8S wasn't promising for a newcomer. It looked like the work of a company already competing at the top. Testing on public roads and police trouble. Even as the CC8S came together, Christian had a problem. He didn't have a test track. So he did what he had to do. He tested on public roads in rural Sweden. Soon villagers saw a mysterious supercar flying by at insane speeds. Naturally, the police got involved. They investigated the strange silver prototype. They questioned Christian. They warned him about road laws, safety, noise limits. For a moment, everything seemed at risk. But instead of shutting him down, the officers listened to his story and surprisingly supported him. One officer later admitted, "We thought he was crazy, but crazy in a good way." The Cannes breakthrough. Christian knew he needed a moment, a stage, a spotlight, and he found one at the Cannes Film Festival, the most glamorous event in Europe, full of celebrities, millionaires, and global media. Against all odds, he transporting the CC prototype to Cannes. When the car arrived, people didn't just look. They stared. Crowds gathered. Photographers circled. Investors whispered. Journalists took notes. Nobody asked, "Is this Swedish?" They asked, "Who built this?" For the first time, the world took Koenigsegg seriously. But attention creates pressure. Cannes gave Christian visibility. But visibility brought new problems. Heavy checkmark journalists wanted performance numbers. Heavy checkmark investors demanded proof. Heavy checkmark competitors started watching. Heavy checkmark critics questioned production capability. Heavy checkmark banks asked about revenue. Heavy checkmark engineers warned about costs. Heavy checkmark suppliers needed guarantees. A prototype gets applause. A production car needs millions. Christian had hype, but no factory, no large team, no established supply chain, and no financial safety net. Koenigsegg was attracting global attention, but behind the scenes, the company was still one big risk. And the next challenge would push Koenigsegg to its limits, because building a single masterpiece is rare, but building a whole company around it is almost impossible. The CC8S had given Koenigsegg something priceless. Attention, but attention doesn't pay for factories, or engineers, or production, or survival. Christian von Koenigsegg was still running the company like a man walking on a tightrope, with no safety net beneath him. He had a prototype. He had hype. He had dreams. But what he didn't have was a real home for Koenigsegg. And that's where this chapter begins, with a building that would almost destroy the entire company before it even had a chance to shine. The first real factory, a chance at survival. After the Cannes breakthrough, Christian knew one thing. If he wanted to turn Koenigsegg into a real car company, he needed a real production facility. Not a shed, not a borrowed workshop, a factory. And then a miracle happened. A small airbase in Sweden, the Margretetorp Flugfabrik, was shutting down. It had a hangar, big open floors, high ceilings, and enough room to build supercars. To Christian, it looked like destiny. Koenigsegg moved in. The team was small. The equipment was limited. But for the first time, they had a real place to call home. It was cold, It was old. It was far from glamorous. But it was theirs. It was the next step. The step toward the CC8S becoming a production car. And Koenigsegg becoming a real company. But just when everything seemed to be going right, everything went wrong. December 22, 2000, the fire. It was winter in Sweden, dark, quiet, freezing. The team was wrapping up work, preparing for the holidays. Inside the factory, the CC prototype stood proudly, the heart of Koenigsegg's future. And then, a spark, a small electrical fault, a moment of bad luck. Within minutes, flames burst through the workshop. The fire spread fast, too fast. Smoke filled the air. Machines melted. Tools burned. Documents turned to ash. The prototype, the car that represented years of struggle, was swallowed by flames. The heat shattered windows. The roof collapsed. The fire raged through everything the company had built. By morning, Koenigsegg's factory was gone. Just ashes, charred steel, blackened concrete, a frozen graveyard of melted dreams. The aftermath, everyone thought it was over. News spread quickly. Koenigsegg factory destroyed. Prototype burned. Production impossible. Dream over. Friends called Christian. Suppliers backed out. Some early investors disappeared. People whispered that the company was finished. Most startups would have died right there. Even established car companies struggled to survive a fire. But Koenigsegg was built differently. The fire wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something bigger. Christian's reaction, the moment that defined him. When Christian saw the factory in ruins, he didn't panic. He didn't break down. He walked through the ashes in silence. He looked at the burned prototype. He inhaled the smoke of everything he built. And he made a decision. We rebuild. Now, there was no hesitation, no doubts, no fear. His team followed him, not because he was their boss, but because they believed in him. The fire had taken everything, but it couldn't take the dream. A miracle from Sweden, the angel investor arrives. A few days later, something unbelievable happened. A Swedish businessman, moved by Christian's story, visited the burned factory. He saw the destruction. He saw the remains. He saw the passion in Christian's eyes. And he said the words that changed everything. How much do you need to rebuild? Koenigsegg finally found its first true financial lifeline. Funds came in. Supplies returned. The team doubled down. The fire that was supposed to kill Koenigsegg became the reason it survived. A new home, a stronger factory. The Swedish government, impressed by Christian's resilience, offered Koenigsegg a new headquarters, an abandoned Air Force base, in Ängelholm. Massive hangars, runways, heavy infrastructure, room to grow into a world-class brand. This wasn't just a factory. This was a kingdom. The fire had destroyed Koenigsegg's old home, only to push it toward a better one. The new base in Ängelholm would become the birthplace of every Koenigsegg hypercar ever made. The rebirth after the flames. By early 2002, the CC8S was reborn. Better, stronger, more refined. The fire had forged Christian's spirit deeper. The company had survived the unthinkable. And now, it was time for the world to see what Koenigsegg could truly do. A new factory, a reborn car, a stronger team, a bigger dream. Next chapter, Koenigsegg steps onto the world stage and challenges the giants for real. The CC8S had given Koenigsegg something priceless. Attention. But attention doesn't pay for factories. or engineers, or production, or survival. Christian von Koenigsegg was still running the company like a man walking on a tightrope, with no safety net beneath him. He had a prototype. He had hype. He had dreams. But what he didn't have was a real home for Koenigsegg. And that's where this chapter begins, with a building that would almost destroy the entire company before it even had a chance to shine. The first real factory, a chance at survival. After the can breakthrough, Christian knew one thing. If he wanted to turn Koenigsegg into a real car company, he needed a real production facility. Not a shed, not a borrowed workshop, a factory. And then a miracle happened. A small airbase in Sweden, the Margretetorp Flugfabrik, was shutting down. It had a hangar, big open floors, high ceilings, and enough room to build supercars. To Christian, it looked like destiny. Koenigsegg moved in. The team was small. The equipment was limited. But for the first time, they had a real place to call home. It was cold. It was old. It was far from glamorous. But it was theirs. It was the next step. The step toward the CC8S becoming a production car, and Koenigsegg becoming a real company. But just when everything seemed to be going right, everything went wrong. December 22, 2000, the fire. It was winter in Sweden, dark, quiet, freezing. The team was wrapping up work, preparing for the holidays. Inside the factory, the CC prototype stood proudly, the heart of Koenigsegg's future. And then, a spark, a small electrical fault, a moment of bad luck. Within minutes, flames burst through the workshop. The fire spread fast, too fast. Smoke filled the air. Machines melted. Tools burned. Documents turned to ash. The prototype, the car that represented years of struggle, was swallowed by flames. The heat shattered windows. The roof collapsed. The fire raged through everything the company had built. By morning, Koenigsegg's factory was gone. Just ashes, charred steel, blackened concrete, a frozen graveyard of melted dreams. The aftermath, everyone thought it was over. News spread quickly. Koenigsegg factory destroyed. Prototype burned. Production impossible. Dream over. Friends called Christian. Suppliers backed out. Some early investors disappeared. People whispered that the company was finished. Most startups would have died right there. Even established car companies struggled to survive a fire. But Koenigsegg was built differently. The fire wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something bigger. Christian's reaction, the moment that defined him. When Christian saw the factory in ruins, he didn't panic. He didn't break down. He walked through the ashes in silence. He looked at the burned prototype. He inhaled the smoke of everything he built. And he made a decision. We rebuild. Now, there was no hesitation, no doubts, no fear. His team followed him, not because he was their boss, but because they believed in him. The fire had taken everything, but it couldn't take the dream. A miracle from Sweden, the angel investor arrives. A few days later, something unbelievable happened. A Swedish businessman, moved by Christian's story, visited the burned factory. He saw the destruction. He saw the remains. He saw the passion in Christian's eyes. And he said the words that changed everything. How much do you need to rebuild? Koenigsegg finally found its first true financial lifeline. Funds came in. Supplies returned. The team doubled down. The fire that was supposed to kill Koenigsegg became the reason it survived. A new home, a stronger factory, The Swedish government, impressed by Christian's resilience, offered Koenigsegg a new headquarters, an abandoned Air Force base in Ängelholm, massive hangars, runways, heavy infrastructure, room to grow into a world-class brand. This wasn't just a factory. This was a kingdom. The fire had destroyed Koenigsegg's old home, only to push it toward a better one. The new base in Ängelholm would become the birthplace of every Koenigsegg hypercar ever made. The rebirth after the flames. By early 2002, the CC8S was reborn. Better, stronger, more refined. The fire had forged Christian's spirit deeper. The company had survived the unthinkable. And now, it was time for the world to see what Koenigsegg could truly do. A new factory, a reborn car, a stronger team, a bigger dream. Next chapter, Koenigsegg steps onto the world stage and challenges the giants for real. The fire should have killed Koenigsegg. It should have ended the story before it even began. But instead, it did something unexpected. It forged the company into steel. And out of that fire came a car that would change everything. For Christian von Koenigsegg, the CC8S, a machine that didn't just represent recovery. It represented arrival. This was the car that would finally take Koenigsegg from a dream in a shed to a real challenger in the world of supercars. A supercar with no right to exist. When the CC8S rolled out of the new Ängelholm airbase, it didn't look like the product of a tiny Swedish team. It looked like something Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche, or McLaren would have spent hundreds of millions on. Its silhouette was clean. Its curves were futuristic. The carbon fiber gleamed in the light. The dihedral synchrohelix doors rose like wings. And most shocking of all, the CC8S wasn't just a pretty face. It was fast, really fast. The engine that didn't make sense. Christian didn't have the resources to design an engine from scratch. So he took an existing V8 and re-engineered it into something the world had never seen. The CC8S produced 655 horsepower. In the early 2000s, that was insanity. It was more power than heavy checkmark Ferrari 360 Modena, heavy checkmark Porsche 911 Turbo, heavy checkmark Lamborghini Diablo VT, heavy checkmark Aston Martin DB7, heavy checkmark Mercedes SL55 AMG. And it weighed less than most of them. Christian didn't just build a supercar. He built a monster. The CC8S goes to Geneva and the world goes silent. The Geneva Motor Show is where legends are made and forgotten. It's the arena where the biggest brands flex their muscles. Ferrari brings their best. Lamborghini brings their loudest. Porsche brings their smartest. Bugatti brings their strongest. And into this battlefield walked a tiny Swedish company with a car no one believed could exist. When the CC8S was unveiled, journalists gathered slowly at first. Then they rushed. Then they stared. Then they whispered. Who built this? Where did this come from? Is this really Swedish? How is this possible? The CC8S became the surprise star of Geneva. It didn't just stand next to the giants. It overshadowed them. Breaking a world record, the impossible happens. Christian didn't want praise. He wanted proof. So Koenigsegg took the CC8S to the testing grounds. They pushed it, stressed it, measured it, timed it, and then something unbelievable happened. The CC8S earned the Guinness World Record for the most powerful production car in the world, a title that shattered global expectations, a title that announced Koenigsegg is real. Ferrari didn't have it. Lamborghini didn't have it. Porsche didn't have it. Bugatti didn't have it. A small Swedish startup did. And the world took notice. The first customer and the first real money. The CC8S wasn't just admired. People wanted to buy it. The first buyers came from places Christian never expected. Hollywood, Dubai, France, Switzerland, Japan. Not just car lovers, car collectors. And then an even bigger surprise. Prince Albert of Monaco visited the Koenigsegg stand. He didn't come for Ferrari. He didn't come for Lamborghini. He came for Koenigsegg. Not only did he praise the CC8S, he endorsed the brand publicly. For a young company, this was like getting blessed by royalty. Because it was. But with success comes new enemies. The CC8S was a global shockwave. But shockwaves shake the ground. The giants began to notice. Ferrari questioned Koenigsegg's testing methods. Lamborghini dismissed them as lucky newcomers. Porsche engineers quietly looked at the aerodynamics. Bugatti, working on the Veyron, quietly double-checked their projections. McLaren took notes. Christian had entered the arena. And now every giant tightened their armor. Because Koenigsegg wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to win awards. He wasn't supposed to break records. He wasn't supposed to survive. But he did. And now, the world's most powerful car wore a Swedish badge. The CC8S was only the beginning. The hype was massive. The orders were real. The industry was alert. Koenigsegg was on the map. But Christian knew something. The CC8S wasn't the final goal. It was the stepping stone. Because now he wanted to build something even more extreme. More lightweight. More powerful. More advanced. A machine that would redefine what a supercar could be. A machine that would evolve into the legendary Koenigsegg CCR. And that next step would push Koenigsegg straight into a battle against the fastest cars on Earth. The CC8S had done the impossible. It got Koenigsegg on the global map. It brought money, respect, and credibility. But for Christian von Koenigsegg, that wasn't enough. Christian wasn't trying to build just another supercar company. He wasn't chasing Ferrari's heritage, Porsche's precision, or Lamborghini's drama. He wanted one thing: to build the fastest car in the world. A car that didn't just win races or break records. A car that would rewrite physics. And that desire led to Koenigsegg's next monster. The Koenigsegg CCR. The global speed war begins. In the early 2000s, the throne of speed was held by giants. McLaren F1, 386.4 km/h, 240.1 mph. Play button Bugatti Veyron in development, promised 400+ km/h. Play button Ferrari Enzo, the technological masterpiece. Play button Pagani Zonda, a rising Italian rival. These weren't cars. These were legends. To challenge them was insane. For a small Swedish company with barely a decade of existence. To challenge the McLaren F1, the greatest naturally aspirated car ever built, was pure madness. But Christian didn't care. He believed Koenigsegg could do it. Building the CCR, a weapon born from the CC8S. The CCR wasn't a new car. It was the CC8S, evolved, sharpened, weaponized. Christian refined every part. Heavy check mark, more power. The V8 was upgraded to produce 806 horsepower. In 2004, this was shocking. Koenigsegg had more horsepower than Lamborghini Murcielago, Ferrari Enzo, Mercedes SLR McLaren, Porsche Carrera GT, Pagani Zonda C12S. The CCR wasn't competing with the giants. It was leading them. Heavy check mark, more carbon fiber. Koenigsegg doubled the carbon content. The chassis got stiffer. The body got lighter. The aerodynamics became sharper. Heavy check mark, better brakes, better tires, better aero. Everything was re-engineered to survive the forces of 400 km/h. Heavy check mark, a huge front splitter plus large rear wing. Not for show, for stability at world record speeds. The CCR was no longer a boutique Swedish supercar. It was a hypercar prototype, long before hypercar existed as a term. The Nardo speed attempt, Koenigsegg takes the shot. In 2005, Koenigsegg took the CCR to the Nardo Ring in Italy, one of the fastest test tracks on Earth. The mission was simple: beat the McLaren F1, claim the world's fastest car record. Journalists gathered. Rival teams observed quietly. The Swedish crew stood nervously in the pit lane. The CCR roared to life, its exhaust echoing across the Italian track. Lap after lap, the car pushed harder, faster, closer to the limit. And then, it happened. The CCR reached 387.87 km/h, 241.63 mph. Koenigsegg had done it. A small Swedish company had beaten the McLaren F1. The title of world's fastest production car belonged to Koenigsegg. Not Ferrari, not Lamborghini, not Porsche, not Bugatti, not McLaren. Koenigsegg. A victory that shocked the world. When the news broke, the automotive world went silent. The giants, the brands with billion-dollar R&D budgets, had just been beaten by a company working out of an old Swedish airbase. Magazines wrote headlines like, "The new Speed King. Sweden steals the throne. Koenigsegg breaks the unbreakable record." Christian had done it. He had climbed the mountain no one thought he could. But the throne of speed is not safe. It is a battlefield. And one company was quietly preparing its counterattack. Bugatti fires back. Koenigsegg's record didn't just impress the world. It shook one company to the core. Bugatti. At the time, Bugatti was still finalizing the Veyron, a car built with unlimited Volkswagen money. 16 cylinders, quad turbos, and a promise of 400 plus km/h. Koenigsegg's victory added pressure, because now the world expected Bugatti to crush the CCR. The Veyron became more than a car. It became a statement. And in 2005, Bugatti delivered 407 km/h, 253 mph. They took the crown back. The war had officially begun. A battle Koenigsegg refused to lose. Christian wasn't angry. He was inspired. To him, Bugatti's challenge wasn't defeat. It was motivation. The CCR taught Koenigsegg something. They could fight the giants. They could win. They could return. And so Christian began designing the next chapter. A car faster, smarter, lighter, and more advanced. A car that would become the Koenigsegg CCX. And this time, the world wasn't laughing anymore. The giants were watching. The CCR proved something unbelievable. Koenigsegg could beat the giants. But if Christian von Koenigsegg wanted to build a real global company, he needed to conquer the most important market in the world. America. The United States wasn't just a country. It was the kingdom of car culture, the land of collectors, billionaires, racetracks, and the biggest supercar market on Earth. If Koenigsegg wanted long-term survival, they needed US approval. But there was a problem. America's automotive laws were the strictest on the planet. Crash tests, emissions, safety standards, the kind that only billion-dollar companies could afford. Koenigsegg wasn't a billion-dollar company. It wasn't even close. But Christian made a decision anyway. We build a car for America. Project CCX, the most ambitious Koenigsegg yet. Christian didn't want a small update. He wanted a new monster. Thus began the creation of the Koenigsegg CCX. X for 10 years of Koenigsegg. But the CCX wasn't just an anniversary model. It was a complete reinvention. Christian re-engineered nearly everything. Heavy check mark the engine. Koenigsegg developed its own engine block. Not borrowed, not bought, not adapted. A new Let 1D5D, Let 1D5FC, Let 1D5F2, Let 1D5FB, Let 1D5F6, Let 1D5F4 engine. Stronger, cleaner, more powerful. Heavy check mark the aero. A bigger splitter. Cleaner airflow around the wheels. A redesigned rear. And improved downforce. Heavy check mark the body. The car was lengthened. The cooling was improved. The carbon structure was redesigned from scratch. Heavy check mark US safety requirements. Christian added crash structures, airbags and emission systems. Just to meet the impossible American rules. Something Bugatti didn't even attempt for the Veyron until later. This wasn't just evolution. It was a rebirth. The CCX launch, a global shockwave. When Koenigsegg revealed the CCX at the Geneva Motor Show, the world didn't just look. They stared. The CCX didn't look like a new version. It looked like a weapon. Wide, aggressive, powerful, alive, and under the hood. 806 horsepower. From a Koenigsegg-designed engine. Not Ford. Not GM. Not BMW. Not Mercedes. Koenigsegg, a tiny Swedish company, now built its own engine. That alone was a miracle. But the CCX wasn't just strong. It was smart, efficient, clean, US legal. And soon Christian believed it would be America's new speed king. But then came the disaster. Top Gear, the test that nearly destroyed Koenigsegg. In 2006, Koenigsegg sent the CCX to the biggest automotive show in the world. Top Gear. This was the opportunity every supercar company dreamed of. A good review on Top Gear could change everything. Christian was excited. The world was excited. But what happened next was a nightmare. Stig took the CCX around the Top Gear track. The car blasted through corners, roared down the straights, and looked unstoppable. Then, the CCX lost control, spun, slid, and slammed into the tire wall. The world gasped. The headlines were brutal. Koenigsegg crashes on Top Gear. Is the CCX too dangerous? Small company, big mistake. For a young brand like Koenigsegg, this kind of PR could kill everything. Dealers pulled back. Buyers hesitated. Competitors smirked. The internet mocked the brand. Christian didn't sleep that night. He knew one thing. If he didn't fix this immediately, Koenigsegg might not survive. The wing that saved Koenigsegg. Christian didn't complain. He didn't blame the track. He didn't blame Top Gear. Instead, he said, "We will fix it. Give us 1 week." His team worked day and night. They redesigned the rear wing, added massive downforce, improved stability. 7 days later, they returned. The new version was called the Koenigsegg CCX Top Gear wing. Stig took it out again. This time the CCX didn't spin. It didn't slip. It didn't struggle. It dominated. The CCX posted a lap time that shocked the world. Faster than the Ferrari Enzo and the Porsche Carrera GT. Top Gear declared, "This is one of the fastest cars we've ever tested." Koenigsegg didn't just recover from disaster. They turned it into proof that they could adapt, improve, and overcome like no other brand. The CCX puts Koenigsegg on America's radar. Now Koenigsegg was everywhere. Heavy check mark American car magazines. Heavy check mark Hollywood garages. Heavy check mark billionaire collections. Heavy check mark race tracks. Heavy check mark supercar events. Heavy check mark online forums. Heavy check mark TV features. The CCX wasn't just a Swedish supercar. It was a global contender. And yet, Christian wasn't satisfied. Because the speed war wasn't over. Bugatti had the Veyron. SSC was preparing the ultimate aero. McLaren was planning a comeback. Pagani was evolving. The giants were watching Koenigsegg closely. Christian knew the next battle would decide everything. The next car had to be faster, smarter, stronger, unquestionable. And that car would become legendary. The Koenigsegg Agera. The CCX had put Koenigsegg on the map. It survived Top Gear. It conquered America. It stood tall next to Ferrari, Porsche, Lamborghini, and Pagani. But the world of speed was changing. Bugatti had fired a nuclear shot with the Veyron, a quad-turbo W16 monster backed by billions from Volkswagen. SSC North America had stepped in with the ultimate aero and briefly taken the world's fastest crown. McLaren was preparing its rebirth. Pagani was refining the Zonda into a legend. Every giant was sharpening its sword. And Christian von Koenigsegg knew. Koenigsegg needed a new weapon. Something that wasn't just upgraded, but reborn. A car that wasn't just fast, but fearless. A car that didn't just break records, but broke expectations. And that car became the Koenigsegg Agera. A new philosophy, beauty plus physics plus madness. The Agera wasn't created to impress. It wasn't built for comfort. It wasn't built to be practical. It was engineered around one question. How do we destroy every speed record that exists? Christian redesigned everything. Heavy checkmark a new 5L twin-turbo Koenigsegg engine. Stronger than anything before it. More efficient. Ridiculously powerful. Heavy checkmark next-gen carbon fiber monocoque. Even lighter, even stiffer, even safer. Heavy checkmark active aerodynamics. Adjusting itself to bend air like clay. Heavy checkmark a new traction system. Created in-house. Because nothing on the market was good enough. Heavy checkmark the triplex suspension. Invented by Koenigsegg. To control massive power without losing grip. Everything was designed with one intention. Dominate. The Agera R, the beast that woke the world up. In 2011, Koenigsegg unveiled the Agera R. The world didn't just stare. The world froze. 1,140 horsepower. 0-300 km/h in 14.53 seconds. A world record. And then something even crazier. 0-300 km/h. Acceleration plus braking. In 21.19 seconds. Another world record. This wasn't just fast. This was supernatural. The Agera R wasn't playing in the hypercar category. It was creating a new one. Agera versus Bugatti, the rivalry of the decade. The Veyron was still the king on paper. 1,001 horsepower. 16 cylinders. 4 turbos. Unlimited funding. But the Agera had something Bugatti didn't. Weight, innovation, agility, and pure mechanical wizardry. It wasn't a tank. It was a scalpel. Reviewers called the Agera R Bugatti's worst nightmare. Physics on fast forward. A machine that shouldn't exist. Even Bugatti engineers reportedly studied Koenigsegg's aero work. Christian had turned Koenigsegg from an underdog into a true hypercar superpower. But Koenigsegg wasn't done. Enter the Agera RS. In 2015, Christian revealed a monster even crazier. The Agera RS. A car with heavy checkmark 1,341 horsepower. Heavy checkmark insane downforce. Heavy checkmark a lighter chassis. Heavy checkmark smarter aerodynamics. Heavy checkmark faster gearbox. Heavy checkmark upgraded triplex suspension. This was the car that would rewrite history. The Agera RS wasn't just fast. It was the perfect weapon. The world record run, Nevada 2017. On November 4, 2017, Koenigsegg took the Agera RS to a closed stretch of highway in Nevada. The mission: break the Bugatti Chiron's speed record. Not once, twice, and without excuses. 2 runs, in opposite directions. No chiding, no wind advantage, no slope advantage, just raw engineering. The Agera RS ran 284 mph, 457.5 km/h, and 271 mph, 436.4 km/h. Average 277.9 mph, 447.2 km/h. The fastest production car in history. The world gasped. Bugatti fans were silent. Pagani fans were silent. Journalists were speechless. A tiny Swedish company had beaten everyone. Again, without billions, without an army of engineers, without corporate backing, just innovation, obsession, and hunger. Koenigsegg didn't steal the crown. They earned it. The legacy of the Agera. The Agera didn't just win records. It created a new generation of hypercars. 1 horsepower per kilogram. Regera, Koenigsegg's direct drive miracle. Jesko, the next world speed project. Gemera, the world's first 4-seat hyper GT. Christian didn't just build fast cars. He built a philosophy. Innovation over tradition. Ingenuity over money. Engineering over ego. The Agera era proved that Koenigsegg wasn't lucky. Koenigsegg was unstoppable. A final thought: the impossible dream came true. In the 1990s, Christian stood in a shed, with no money, no team, no factory, no investors, no plan, only a vision that became the CC, then the CC8S, then the CCR, then the CCX, then the Agera, then the fastest car in the world. Koenigsegg didn't just compete with the giants. They beat them, and in the process, Christian von Koenigsegg proved something the world had forgotten. You don't need a legacy to build one. You just need the courage to try the impossible.